You're listening to Intentionally Catholic, a podcast about living our Catholic faith with joy and intention.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening. I'm Dan Hansen, and as always, I'm here with Father Ron Hutchinson. And Father, today I want to talk about beauty. You know, we've had a lot of conversations in the past, and we've talked about a lot of different things. And in a number of those conversations, every now and then, I can think of three particular times you've mentioned that you hear from a lot of people, you know, about how beautiful the Basilica is. You know, the Basilica of St. Adalbert in Grand Rapids. You hear that, and right every single time as I'm ready to respond and agree with that, you spin into this comment about how that's kind of a pet peeve of yours or something, that idea. I want to explore that. What is it exactly that you hate about beauty?
I don't hate beauty. And I don't even hate that people think that the Basilica is beautiful. I don't even know that it's necessarily a pet peeve, but it just, to me, to have people say that what they think of immediately about your parish that you serve is its beautiful building, kind of always scares me, because the church, to me, whether we are talking small c, like as in parish, or church big C, isn't the buildings. I mean, the buildings are important, don't get me wrong. And I think they hold a very important place in helping us in our faith lives. But I want people to know us for more than our beautiful building. Or I'm always afraid, is that the extent of what we're known for? You know, we have this beautiful building on the west side, you know.
Do you hear that from Catholics? Do you hear that from
I hear from everybody. I hear from everybody.
So,
you know, we get calls almost every day, people saying, and the first thing they always say is, "Oh, you have such a beautiful church. I want to have my wedding there." And it's like, okay, there's a little more to it, you know? And so, yeah, I guess that's the reality I'm sort of dealing with. I'm coming at it from those kinds of things that get, you know, people wanting the use of, you know.
No, well, and that's where I guess I'm just curious, because I don't know that we've ever followed this conversation any further than you saying that.
Me
and then
groaning.
I just drop it. I drop it like a hot potato and move on. But are they mostly getting this comment from people who are, like you said, they want to have a wedding there or something?
Yeah.
I mean, is that largely where it comes from?
Yeah, it largely comes from that. I'm not saying that we hear it all the time from people who are visiting and worshiping with us. And, you know, that I don't mind as much when someone has been there for a mass and they're like, oh, the building was beautiful, the liturgy was beautiful, the music was beautiful. You know, I guess I like all that. The other problem, I guess, with it is, I sort of want to understand, like, what do you mean by beautiful? What does that lead you to? What it's gotta be more than just, oh, this is pretty, you know? Because to me, it should lead us to a deeper faith. It should lead to a deeper understanding of God, a deeper appreciation of everything, you know?
I agree with that, and I don't think you're what I'm going to say next. I don't think you're disagreeing with, but I think that journey can take a long time sometimes.
Yeah,
and I think that beauty, that beauty is a jolt. And you know, I guess it always strikes me, and I always think about this comment. You know, even though you've only said it 2 or 3 different times to me, but it really resonates because that is one of the main things that just took my breath away. Before we'd even participated in a liturgy, I walked in, and just walking in, the sense of sacred, the sense of weightiness, and just the beauty. I had not ever been in a place like this before, and it was so profoundly impacting.
Thank you. You just said more right there than, I guess. I always want people to give me a better sense of what beauty has struck them about the beauty. And you just said it. The sense of sacred, the sense of weightiness, the like holiness, like, something bigger than yourself, bigger than this world, I love because I mean, I guess part of it to me is it's the artist in me, it's the liturgist in me, it's the pastor in me. All of it wants, like, okay, I'm willing to have this conversation on a deeper level. I just don't want it to get stuck at beauty, because beauty's fleeting. Even building beauty is fleeting, because we're human beings. What one day beauty causes us to be odd, we become used to it. We become immune to it. So when you're talking about bigger things, like, okay, when I walk in here, I instantly understand the concept that churches were supposed to draw your heart and your mind to heaven. They were supposed to make you be in awe of the sacredness of God, of the otherness of God, and I think that the problem today is much of the architecture we have through, and not just churches, but definitely churches, many of them are just functional. They're meeting spaces. They're gathering spaces. They're not meant, or nor do they have any intention to be something that calls your mind to God and to sacredness and holiness, and that causes me to need to do something about my life to, in a sense, be worthy of being in this space.
I know in my previous life, back when I was in the Protestant church, I can only speak for myself. I can't say that this was the idea or the mentality throughout, but I remember really, really getting annoyed. I was going to seminary and stuff like that, and in that summer leading up to it, the church that I was in was in the middle of a building project, and they had all these beautiful things, picked out, beautiful fabrics, beautiful this, beautiful that. We were looking at the little idea boards in the lobbies and stuff like that. And it annoyed me to the core, because I kept thinking, I remember saying to friends, we should, we could worship in a barn, in a pole barn, and save money and give that money to the poor. And there was this sense of, really, if I boil it all down, pride in my ideas. I was very proud of the idea, I guess, that, I'd rather be a mission church and give that money away than to build this beautiful building. So I did struggle with the idea of, Catholic buildings that were, churches that just with gold and all of this, it just seemed like, wow. And I know that is a mentality that permeates, because I hear that all the time, that we've got, now I'll have Protestant friends or people that I'll read about will bring up that idea. Look at all the money that you've got tied up into this stuff. And yet now, from this point of view, I realize the value of not just what this beautiful space, how that impacts my heart and draws me to God. I think about the people who, we come from all over the place. This building is for everybody to draw us to God. Yeah. And I think the value is in that. And I do think, you mentioned it's really important that the value and the beauty draws us to God, and it puts our hearts on this bigger plane. And I get that, this higher plane. And yet I do still think that there's this, to me, it's incredibly profound. And I think it's a sign of, it almost, to me, is almost a sign of God's grace, is that sometimes my brain, I'm in church waiting for Mass to start, I'm praying, and it's just been a week and I can't even get my thoughts collected. And yet there's a couple of different stained glass windows, I don't know what they call rosettes, whatever they are, where you've got Jesus on one side and then Mary is on the other side, just their face. The glass around that image is so beautiful. I mean, when you see the sun coming through it, it's almost like crazy blue skies with all kinds of beautiful clouds in them. I don't know. That's how it strikes me. Sometimes I get lost just in that color, just in that beauty. And I'm not going any further, but this sense of peace comes from it. And I love the fact that it's there for me. In other places, other buildings I've been in, other churches, that hasn't been a part of it. And I'm so grateful to have it.
Yeah, and it's meant to do that, by the way. I mean, churches, Catholic churches, historically, the reason for windows, paintings, statues, any of it was meant to be a jumping off point for prayer or a place to settle.
Yeah, a resting spot.
A resting spot. And so I don't ever want to negate that that's important. I mean, it is important. And I don't, please understand, I do not buy into like, let's meet in a barn because, we could give that money to, the poor. It's interesting. I never, it's not to say that one of our duties is not to take care of the poor. Okay. It is. But we're never going to negate that responsibility, meaning it's never going to go away. Jesus even said it's not going to go away. And that doesn't mean then that we don't have to use our resources for other things too, because by that same token would say, well, don't use your resources then to help people grow in their faith or be formed in understanding of their faith or, anything. Just like, let's just keep pouring it into the poor. Okay, well, you know what? There are many social agencies doing that every single day. And that isn't our only responsibility as the church.
Right.
So,
and when you think about the fact that the building is, I mean, I've read plenty of these anecdotes and stuff where, this idea is presented, and the idea is, look, the church, this beautiful space it's open for everybody. Everybody can come and experience this beauty, this step outside of their normal lives. That impacts the poor as well, because the poor we're not just hungry. We're not, they're not just in need of these other things. They're in need of spiritual things as well. And the building does provide.
And all of us are poor in various ways. Then we may need that building for a variety of reasons.
Right.
We may have a poverty of faith, a poverty of willingness to give ourselves to God. There's lots of poverty, and I'm not trying to undermine, true poverty. That is not the case. But one of the things I do appreciate about the Basilica is because of its beauty, because of the very things that have caused you to be in awe. I often come into the building and am going to have some task that I have to do, whether it be getting ready for mass or, I forgot something, in the confessional or you name it. I have any number of tasks that I do in there. I will run into people just walking around looking at the windows or walking around mesmerized by the how large a space it is and how mammoth it is, and that there's not any corner of it that doesn't have some form of decoration, some form of beauty, little things that capture you that you at first don't even notice when you come in. One of the things, the capitals on the pillars, many people at first they see the gold up there, but they don't take a close look until, they've had time to absorb a little bit of the building. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's little angel faces up there. Well, yeah, there are. There are many dozens of little angels, putti in Italian they're called, that are on the columns, at the top. And, and there's angels throughout the whole entire space, and there's angels outside the interior space, so yeah, there's lots of little things to kind of capture your imagination and draw you in. And it all has a place. It's always funny though, to me, the things that people will be most, in a sense, concerned about or that they're puzzled by.
Sure.
One of the things I didn't even think about till yesterday, I had a couple that was in there and, I just said hello and, they were like, hey, are you the pastor here? And I'm like, well, yeah. Are you one of the priests here? And I said, I'm the pastor. And they're like, we have a question, what in that window up there, it looks like a snake. What does that have to do with Jesus? And because it's above the crucifixion window. I said, well, actually, it isn't a snake. It's two letters, S and I, and quite honestly, that was when I got puzzled because I said, I still haven't done the research to find out what those two initials are, what what Latin words they're meant to, remind you of, because that's what they are, because they're similar to what's underneath all the statues. Underneath each of the statues, there's like an S, a great big S, and like under the statue of St. Francis, it's a F with a line underneath it. Well, that's to help you to go, that's St. Francis, a saint, S, F, but we're not going to write out his whole name. We're just going to put a line underneath it and tell you his name's longer than that.
Because they're carving it in marble.
Because they carved it in marble.
That's a long name to write.
That's a long name.
Let's just put an F there.
Yeah, let's just put an F, and you'll go, oh, St. Francis. Okay. So but it was interesting. They were like, we thought they looked like snakes. I'm like, well, they're not snakes, but yeah, I get where you think that. They're stylized S and I.
Oh yeah. No, Hannah, just this past Sunday brought, trying to remember which window it was. It just she noticed basically what you're describing, one of the little details above all the windows, and okay, that's a dove. Well, that's the Holy Spirit. I'm going to go out on a limb here. Yeah, and that's a torch, and this is a this, and what about the pelican? What about? There are so many details, and I knew some of them.
And the interesting part is many of them are to help you understand the concept, in a sense, of what the window is about. They're another window into the window, so to speak. But yeah, they are. There's lots of little details. I mean, there's tons of little things that you don't even notice right away.
So many things to pour through. And you were just talking about people wandering through, and you see them just kind of wandering. And that's what I love about that building, about buildings like this, churches like this, where no expense has been spared. That's probably the wrong way to say it. But really, we understand as it was built, the architects are building it with the sacred in mind. It was built with that in mind. And we get to experience that. And we don't go, we, the general collective, we don't get to go to places like this. I mean, you should see the room I'm sitting in right now. It used to be a men's bathroom. I pulled out the urinals and washed the walls with bleach and put carpet in here and cleaned it up. But that's where I work, for heaven's sake. So I work in this warehouse, or I go to the store and I wander through the groceries and stuff like that. And that's life. I'm in an office. I'm in this place. I'm in that space. And then I walk into this building that instantly this hush settles, and it settles on everybody. I guess I can't say everybody because that's a fallacy. But so many people walk in, even people who aren't religious. And there's just this sense of, it's like being in a museum. It's someplace where I'm not going to shout anymore. This isn't a place for shouting. Something settles. And I think God works in those silences, even when I don't understand what I'm seeing.
I do too. And that's why I do appreciate the beauty. I think I'm being like a snarky old pastor. That I just get concerned when I hear it, it's often I often feel like if they tell me it's beautiful, I'm going to go, oh, okay, you can use it.
Well, to me, that would be a thing that would feel like, okay, it's just a means to an end, or it's means to get a great photograph, or what are great memories or something. Yeah. If that's all it is, who are we to say?
I don't know. I don't want to judge people. I'm just saying that I think because when that starts the phone call, you're like, okay, well, I can see where this is going to go. Or at least that's how you feel immediately, where it's like, okay, maybe I need to give people a better chance than that. But I do think that beauty, I am the first one to say that that's one of the problems I have with modern church architecture. For the most part, what we build now is functional. Yeah. It's functional, and it's cheaper to build functional than to build beauty.
Do you think that's the sole, or is that the main driving influence?
I do think that. I think it's money. I think it's about money. And interestingly enough, when the Basilica was built in 1907, that was like the third or fourth building they had built for this congregation in less than 50 years.
Oh, really?
So let's be really honest here. Those people went from one kind of temporary space to a church space they added onto. So yes, this was like the fourth space. And And I don't believe that what they were now, I'm sure that they weren't just spend whatever you want, Father. I'm sure that wasn't what they were thinking. But
I can't imagine anybody saying
on
that.
the other hand, they didn't want to build something that wasn't worthy of being called a church. They wanted grand and big and European and beautiful, and all of that was part of what they thought about. And so I have no doubt that even in that time and space, they had to be willing to sacrifice greatly to do that. And they weren't just thinking about function. They were thinking about raising their minds to God and raising their hearts to heaven and all of those things. And I worry that modern architecture lacks that premise. It tends to be, churches built in the half circle with, basically stadium seating, and, even Catholic churches, they're plain, they're brick, they're concrete, they're just, or drywall. There's just not a lot of beauty in that stuff, even to the point that often churches that are built today, they'll say, well, we'll get to the beauty stuff, after we get this paid off. Well, as well as I do, that's generations of paying that off. And so the beauty never happens, or they have to try to figure out how to do beauty on a budget. As opposed to doing beauty, like, let's do really cool windows that, they're going to cost a fortune because we're going to have a designer and we're going to have artists. And, instead we find, Mrs. And there's nothing wrong with this too, but, Mrs. So-and-so in our parish does stained glass for a hobby. Let's have her do them, and I'm not saying that there aren't possibly good artists like that, but for the most part, that's always like, well, let's get some color in here that's not going to cost us a fortune to do.
Right. Well, and that's why I'm so glad there's places like the Basilica where you can, wherever I go, wherever my main places are, it's nice to know that there's these little pockets of whatever you want to call it, pockets of beauty, pockets of culture, whatever it is that goes so far back, and you feel connected to something big. Like you said, it feels European, which makes it feel old. It's not.
Yeah, it's not that old. I mean, it was finished in 1914, so that's not really that old. But it definitely was built with an older or a more classical aesthetic that you don't see today. I mean, these kind of buildings are expensive to build. They're not in this day and age. That is not a cheap building to build. Okay, that's a sacrifice to build. But sacrifices like that speak to us. Otherwise, people wouldn't be, saving their pennies to go to Rome or go to Paris or go to, London. We're starved for it, but we somehow don't think it's worth doing today, and I don't understand that entirely.
No, I think part of it is we just don't understand. We don't understand what we're missing. I didn't know what I was missing. And it's so crazy how that space, how God can work that space with, I mean, everything from the theological things that I'm understanding and picking up in the windows to the way the light slants across the tile floor. I mean, that has nothing to do with theology, except at its very core, God created light, and I get to experience that beauty. The sounds, the way the sound moves in that space, the sound of water, the sound of anything. It's just so much more beautiful because of everything about that space. It just completely points you towards something bigger and something more beautiful. And I don't get to experience that every day. So it's great that it's there.
I admit that this is where sometimes being here as the pastor, I'm kind of spoiled because I'm in it all the time, and I have to be careful sometimes not to start to become the person that only sees the things that need to be fixed and the repairs and this is going to cost us and blah, blah, blah. And, that kind of thing.
That happens?
Yeah, it does. I mean, there are times that I walk in there and all I see is the dollar signs, for what has to be dealt with. And I have to be careful because it can't become that for me. It has to become a place that draws me to heaven and draws me to God, the heart of God. And so, it's a weird challenge for me. It's a different challenge. I have to not see it as just the place I work. I have to see it as the place I worship and the place that, and there are days that I can walk in there and trust me, I stand there in awe like anybody else. The sun is coming through a certain window in a certain way. And I'm like, whoa, that's just incredible, So I have my wow moments too. So I don't want to sound like such a curmudgeon that I can't appreciate, and nor I wouldn't want people not to appreciate that it's beautiful. I think we need beauty. I've said that enough times. I hope people get that. For me, that's very important.
I think they get it. You've got a pastor's heart. You want to see us take that next step.
Well, that's why even for me, it's important that, even the vestments that we have, the flower arrangements or the plant arrangements or the environment, whatever we do seasonally, it all has to work to enhance that, not take over, not be something that kind of goes like, oh gosh, that's in here for now, huh? To me, it should only enhance the beauty. And so, we spend a lot of time thinking about all these things. We expend a lot of energy, interestingly enough, doing that.
Well, I know, I can only speak for myself. It's noted and appreciated. I don't know how much, I don't know from behind the scenes what you guys put into that, but it's definitely noted. We go to places where the vestments look like they came from the 70s, and it doesn't impact Mass. I mean, Mass is what it is. It does impact Mass for me, but it doesn't really affect the grand scheme of what's happening. I understand that.
The transubstantiation still happens.
It's all still happening. It's just icing on the cake when the vestments are beautiful and they're intricate. And it's just something else to think about. It's something else to just explore, the color, the beauty, and all these things that God gave us all on display. If you haven't been to the Basilica in Grand Rapids, the Basilica of St. Adalbert, definitely check it out. I'm really curious about what everybody out there thinks. You've listened to the conversation. Now, where do you fall in the grand scheme of things? We want to know. You can send that message to comments@icatholic.show. For Intentionally Catholic, I'm Dan Hansen.
I'm Father Ron Hutchinson. God bless.
Thanks for listening to Intentionally Catholic. If you like what you heard, please consider sharing our show with a friend. If you have comments, questions, or topics you'd like to hear discussed, please email those to comments@icatholic.show. And be sure to tune in next time for another episode.